Pour yourself a cold one.
Let's drink 'em, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of the College Draft.
Yeah, it is Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast, presented as always by DraftKings. Huge UFC fight coming up this weekend. More on that a little bit later. I am Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. I got 5 podcasts. Ross Tucker Football Podcast, 3 times a week in the offseason, 5 times a week during the season. Will Brinson was amazing on yesterday's Ross Tucker Football Podcast talking about beer and Russell Wilson, and not necessarily in that order, but we got into it a lot. Should have Andrew Brandt on tomorrow's Ross Tucker Football Podcast. We got to talk about a lot of things, including rookie contracts like Trevor Lawrence, NIL, and what the name, image, and likeness is going to mean for the agent business moving forward, franchise tag deadlines coming up. So quite a bit to get to with Mr. Brandt tomorrow. We will have Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus. He's a data scientist. He is on today's Even Money podcast. So awesome week. We'll have the Fantasy Feast podcast tomorrow. Andrew Brandt does the business of sports. You can check me out on social at Ross Tucker NFL or at Ross Tucker Pod. All of the shows always get posted to at Ross Tucker Pod, Twitter or Instagram. You can engage on the other platforms as well. And yes, we are on YouTube, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL, which is one of the first places I really knew that my co-host on this show, Emory Hunt, was going to be an absolute rock star. At F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter, but Football Game Plan on YouTube was way ahead of the ball game. Check it out if you haven't already. You can also always pick up footballgameplan.com draft guide, footballgameplan.com/2021 draft guide, or you can start to get ready for the 2022 draft guide as well. Emory, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Ross. Glad to be on the show as always, talking some shop.
Yeah, so a bunch of things to get to. We've been talking about this for months, right? We're going to do the 2018 NFL draft. People always say, you can't judge a draft for 3 years, and then they never actually go back and do it. And I'm not here to, give out grades or evaluate. I just want to know, okay, what can we take away from it? What lessons, if any, can we take away from the 2018 NFL draft? But before we do that, actually, Emory, some draft news. If you're into college football and you're into the draft, and if you're listening or watching this podcast, I have to imagine most of you are. By the way, we will start breaking down the top prospects in the Power 5 conferences and otherwise starting next week. So we are full throttle into the 2021 NFL, or actually 2021 college season, 2022 NFL draft starting next week. But first, we'll do a 2018 draft. However, it looks like the 2022 draft, Emory, is already going to be a little bit different in the sense that they're moving the Shrine Game. And I saw you tweeting about it earlier, so I had to get your thoughts on, before we even get to the timing of it, just your thoughts on moving the Shrine Game.
You know, I get it from a business standpoint, but just from a evaluator and fan and traveler standpoint, I hate that it moves away from Florida. When I go down to, the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Game, it's in the South, it's good weather. It's like a Friday practice during the season. But when you move an event to a major city, everything feels like punt return, right? Everything is just happening so fast. You got to move in and out of traffic. You got to get out the way. You got to keep your head on a swivel. And you don't really get a chance to decompress, because you know how we are during the season. It's nonstop go. We're on the move, calling games, scouting games, doing work in studio. And so going to an all-star event, it's a chance for you to relax, get back into the groove, kind of decompress while also still working. But you move to a major city, man, and it just sounds a lot like in the middle of the year playing football in Times Square.
Well, I was going to say to you, though, I mean, I guess I don't know if all the practices are at Allegiant Stadium or if they're somewhere else, but I mean, the weather, well, actually, yeah, the weather should be nice in Las Vegas that time of year.
It is, and I'm just saying this from a personal perspective. I don't like flights over 2.5 hours, so obviously that is a problem for me. But I guess I'll have to get used to it and the 5 hour flight and get ready for it, get myself ready to go. But that's why I love Florida, because it was 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes, and we caught good tailwind, and I'm in and out like that, and that just made travel easier for me.
What about the fact that, and I think it was Chase Goodbread might have tweeted this, it's going to be the same week as the Senior Bowl, I believe, which I guess that makes sense because it's the same week as the Pro Bowl, and the Senior Week is always the same week as the Pro Bowl, whereas the Shrine Game used to always be the week before the conference championship games. That is interesting. I wonder if they're going to try to compete with the Senior Bowl to get players. I mean, I wonder which one will get more attention from NFL Network. I got a lot of questions.
Yeah, I got a ton of questions, and it goes right along the lines of what you're talking about, competing. I particularly don't like to see all-star games compete with one another, because it kind of takes away from the reason why the all-star games exist, to be a showcase for the players. Now, granted, you want to have, NFL scouts and a lot of NFL scouts and coaches attend your event. And I can understand why the Shrine wants to go toe-to-toe with the Senior Bowl in that regard, because now you have guys that are there, let's say in Vegas, for it's a bigger market and it's easier to get in and out of. So it's easier for scouts to travel there as opposed to going to Mobile, where primarily everybody flies into New Orleans and drives to Mobile. Some, fly into Mobile, take a connection. But for the most part, people drive into, Mobile from New Orleans. And so I just don't want them to compete toe to toe. Because, again, I'm used to going to all of these all-star games, and I would like to continue to go to all of these all-star games. And if you put them all in the same week, it's like, man, what are we doing? But if you're the NFLPA game, you're probably like, wow, we have a full week to ourselves, because they were trying to compete with the Shrine Game over the last 6 or 7 years, having their event the same week, and it wasn't competing with the All-Star game, it was competing with Florida. Do you rather go to Florida, or would you rather go to Carson City, California? And Florida will win out 14 times out of 10. And so now with them having a week to themselves, it'll be interesting to see how big the NFLPA game grows too.
Yeah, that's an interesting part of it that I hadn't really thought about, the NFLPA game. But yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know how many people went to both, I guess is the question. How many people would go to the Shrine Game and then go down to Mobile for the Senior Bowl?
I would probably try to do it, because I know how vital both games are and critical both games are. You kind of want to get to both, because you've gone to both, for the last decade, and you don't want to break that tradition. It's going to be tough though, because, again, if it's the same week, and we know how the Senior Bowl week starts practically Tuesday, the Shrine usually starts on a Monday, so you can kind of maybe catch the kite out after 2 practices and go down to the Senior Bowl and try to catch 2 practices there. So it'll be interesting to see how people divvy it up.
Well, we're divvying up our schedule here on the College Draft podcast by diving into the 2018 draft. Very, very interesting. I was reviewing it earlier this morning, and before I even get into that, I just want people to know it might be the best UFC ever. McGregor, Poirier 3, all set for UFC 264 this weekend. DraftKings is offering 264-1 odds on a knockout in the first round. 264-1 odds on a knockout. So you don't even care who wins the fight. You're just hoping somebody gets knocked out. He got knocked the bleep out. Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code Ross when you sign up to turn $1 into $200. Dude, this is me right here. I don't like to stay up that late, and I like favorable odds. So 264-1. I watched the first round Okay, that stinks. It didn't happen. Oh, yes, he's gone. I love it. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Make sure you use the code Ross. All right, Emory, let's dive into 2018 draft. And we'll just go, I don't know, we'll do 3 picks at a time. The Browns went Baker Mayfield. Then the Giants went Saquon Barkley. The Jets went Sam Darnold. Really interesting because Mayfield, the jury was way out until this past year where he got a new coaching staff, and now people seem to feel better about it. Saquon started out on fire, but then has had injury issues the last couple of years. Darnold flamed out with the Jets, but in Carolina, they think he's the man. I mean, I don't know if I have any takeaways from these 3 guys yet, other than I think my big takeaway from these 3 guys is I don't have a big takeaway yet. I feel like I need one more year for all 3 of these dudes.
You know what's interesting? When you look at the 3, Saquon made the Pro Bowl and won Rookie of the Year, I believe, that season. And the talk leading into the draft was, how high do you take a running back, right? And I remember being on a radio show in Cleveland at the time because the Browns had 2 picks in the top 5. And everyone was asking, well, what do you do with their 2 picks? How would you play it? I was like, well, I'll take Saquon Barkley number 1. Everybody lost their minds. How could you pass up Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield or Josh Rosen or Josh Allen? I was like, because I know I can get the best quarterback at pick 4, and that's Lamar Jackson. So I'm going to have a backfield with Saquon and Lamar and lead the league in rushing for the next decade. And so for me, I would have played it differently. However, the Giants, I still think, made the right move taking Saquon Barkley because he's a difference maker, and he proved to be that right out of the gate. Now, Darnold, I had as my 2nd graded quarterback in the draft class behind Lamar Jackson, and my comp for him was Tony Romo. I felt like he was a guy that can make some off-script plays. He was athletic enough to scramble and make plays with his legs, but had a turnover issue. And that right there has shown to be true so far. Baker Mayfield, I compared him to Case Keenum, saying like, he's a guy that kind of can be solid. Remember that year Case Keenum was coming off the Minnesota year where they got to the NFC Championship game. So it wasn't a knock. It was more of a stylistic comparison. I didn't see Baker as a first overall type pick, but someone that you can win games with if you had the right team around him.
The next couple picks are interesting as well. You've got Denzel Ward at 4 to Cleveland. Denver Broncos took Bradley Chubb at 5. The Colts took Quenton Nelson at 6. I would say perhaps maybe with the exception of the injury to Chubb, I would think all 3 of those teams are pretty happy with those selections.
Yeah, and you also have to add in the injuries with Ward. Ward misses about 3 games a year. So he has to find a way to stay healthy. And I think if you had a do-over, you probably would say maybe Cleveland takes Nelson as opposed to Ward, or maybe they go Chubb. I know that was a thought, out there, like you get the quarterback and you get the pass rusher. But health permitting, all 3 guys that when they're out there, they've been very productive, with Quenton Nelson obviously being the best out of the trio.
The next 3 picks, you got the Bills taking Josh Allen at 7. The Bears taking Roquan Smith at 8. And the linebacker, obviously, people know quarterback Josh Allen. And the Niners taking offensive tackle Mike McGlinchey at 9. Boy, the Josh Allen one, first year was like, second year, third year, whoa.
Yeah, and it's funny because for me, and I have my original scouting report here, I wanted to pull that one specifically because I wrote down for Josh Allen, inside the red zone, Allen protects the ball rather well, seems to maximize the opportunity. And as the field shrinks, he's much more decisive and accurate. Man, that's dead on, because once he got inside the red zone, you look at his red zone numbers in the NFL, I don't think he's had a turnover inside the red zone at all. And the goal for him was, from 20 to 20, it was an adventure. But inside the 20, he locks in, the field shrinks for him, and the ball gets there accurately and he's throwing strikes, he doesn't turn the ball over. That's a great quality to have, but you have to mitigate through the 20-20 area with him. And we saw them have the patience and be able to do that. And that's why he had such a breakout year this season. Now, you want to know if that's more to come, or was it an anomaly because he had one bad year, one average year, one great year. Now you find out in year 4 which one really it is. But I thought that was the pick that everybody talked about in the first round. I thought Roquan Smith was chalk. Everybody kind of had the Bears to take him, and you also look at McGlinchey was kind of people thought it was a reach at the time, but he's proven to be a solid starter for them up front.
Then you get 10, 11, 12. The Cardinals taking Josh Rosen, the quarterback from UCLA. The Dolphins taking Minkah Fitzpatrick, the Alabama safety who's now with the Steelers. And the Tampa Bay Bucks drafting defensive tackle Vita. What lessons are we learning from Rosen, first of all?
Sometimes you have to trust what you see. And I wasn't as high on Rosen as most. I had him right below Baker Mayfield grade-wise, or right at Baker Mayfield. They had the same grade. I had him higher than Mayfield, honestly. He was my third quarterback. But I had a 77.5 grade on him. And I compared this game to Eli Manning. I just thought that athletically he wasn't there. People made a big deal out of his tennis background, say he has the athleticism. But I told people this. I feel like he maxed out as a college freshman. He was so good as a freshman, and we didn't normally see freshman quarterbacks step in and play well. And you kind of had that initial picture, stuck in your mind, and have that throughout the entire time he was in college. But you go back and watch his career, he never really got better. He stayed the same way, which is good for a freshman, but is not good for a junior. And so I thought people kind of overrated his ability. And that's probably why we hadn't seen the success. And some people still hold out hope, saying he needs a chance. Well, man, the Cardinals gave him a full season to start without looking over his shoulder. Then he goes to Miami. They give him every opportunity, and we saw it play out in real time where the offense just looked better with Fitzpatrick out there. So I think that's the lesson. Sometimes things are what they are, and you can't create things that don't exist.
Yeah, that's interesting. Going on from there, Minkah Fitzpatrick and Vita both have become really good players.
I was shocked that Miami gave up on Minkah so early, and he goes and becomes a 2-time All-Pro with Pittsburgh, because he's exactly what you want in today's game in terms of someone that plays safety. It's a positionless position, so he's essentially a defensive back. He can do a lot of different things, but Miami was trying to make him be one thing, and that's not why you drafted him that high. He goes to Pittsburgh, and we know how that is the fountain of youth for so many players and prospects, and I think that's why we've seen him just take off and become the player that he was at Alabama. And Vita, I mean, it took him a while, but man, last year he was dominant up front for Tampa.
The next 3 picks, you've got Washington taking Daron Payne, the Saints taking Marcus Davenport. Daron Payne, D tackle from Washington, Marcus Davenport, D end from the Saints, and then the Oakland Raiders took Kolton Miller, the offensive tackle.
Yeah, and rate them in that order, because that's how their career has gone, right? Payne has been solid for Washington. Davenport has been inconsistent. And remember, the Saints traded up, and I thought, they traded up to go get Lamar Jackson, but they traded up to get Davenport. And Davenport, you can make a case that Trey Hendrickson, who they drafted later in this draft, was better, than Davenport. And I think that right there shows you the unknown part of the draft. Davenport checks all the boxes athletically, but hasn't been able to put it all together on a consistent basis. And Miller has gotten better, but initially, man, it looked like a complete whiff by Oakland at the time. But you hope that he can continue to take steps in the right direction. But that was the one out the 3 that many people believed that was the big whiff.
What's interesting to me about that is, the Raiders already gave him a second contract now. and they're paying him like he's big time. I don't know that he's really there. And I think he might be – somebody has an email to me that we're going to get to probably this week at the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, where he's like the second contract the Raiders have given one of their first-round picks since like Darren McFadden. Like something crazy. I got to look it up, but something really, really crazy. The next 3 picks, man, this is a talented draft. I mean, the next 3, you got the Bills taking linebacker Tremaine Edmunds, the Chargers taking safety Derwin James, and the Packers taking corner Jaire Alexander.
And wow, what a value Derwin James is at that spot, right? You just hope that health permitting, he can see out there, because that has been his bugaboo. But when he's out there, he's been tremendous. A really home run pick there. Jaire Alexander, I had a higher grade on than Denzel Ward. And to see him just continue to thrive every year with Green Bay has been spectacular. And, Tremaine Edmunds, this is why folks got to take emotion out of everything. Folks want him to be Brian Urlacher or Ray Lewis, right? But they never talk about when at this draft, when he was selected, he was 19 years old. So fast forward 3 years, he's 23 now. I mean, the dude is still rookie age and has gotten 3 years of NFL experience. His upside is through the roof. He's 6'4", 250, can play inside or outside backer. Be patient. He's been productive, and he's going to continue to get better. But he was 19 years old when he was taken. Remember, Amobi Okoye was 19 when he was drafted by the Houston Texans, a decade or so ago. But, man, 19 years old, playing linebacker in the NFL and played it well as a rookie. It's impressive.
Yeah, I remember meeting a lot of these guys before the draft. I forget even where this draft was, maybe Dallas. And Edmunds and our next guy, Vander, Esch, really big dudes. I mean, they were like legit 6'5", 250 type guys. The next 3 picks, the Cowboys took Leighton Vander Esch, 19. Lions took Frank Ragnow, 20. The center from Arkansas. The Bengals took Billy Price, center from Ohio State, at 21. Wow. Think about just that, Emory. Just the difference between getting Frank Ragnow at 20 versus Billy Price at 21. It's a big difference, man. That's a big difference.
That really is. Frank Ragnow was my number 1 center in the class, and Billy Price was my number 2. So initially I thought, wow, this is great. We got 2 centers going in the first round. That tells you how good the position was, in my opinion, in thinking in terms of 2018. But looking at it with 2020 eyes, like you said, what a big gap between Ragnow and Price. And Price is like Rasputin. He has still another opportunity this year to make things right, as Trey Hopkins, who I like a lot, got hurt in the last game of the season for the Bengals towards ACL. So we don't know how healthy he's going to be. So guess who's next up on the depth chart? Billy Price. Here's your chance once again to right some wrongs. For Vander Esch, I wasn't as high on Vander Esch, to be honest, coming out. I thought he was stiff athletically and could be a liability in pass coverage. But, this dude went out there and balled out his rookie year and became an asset to that team and was just outstanding. So that was a whiff for me in terms of how well I thought he was going to play right out of the gate.
I distinctly remember while we were in Dallas, I was working for DAZN, there had been rumors about a neck injury for Vander Esch. And I asked him about it. And he was like, nothing wrong with my neck. I have no idea what you're talking about. Because that had come out. Well, he goes to Dallas. Right away, he's wearing that neck collar. So he's got something wrong with his neck. Okay. And now he's had issues with it to the point where they draft Micah Parsons this year. I would say my big takeaway from looking at this draft, Emory, is just how important health is. And there's only so much you can do, right? Some of it's just luck, but some of there was obviously some information out on Vander Esch before it. But Barkley's health, Bradley Chubb's health, you mentioned Denzel Ward, the health of Derwin James. I mean, health has been a huge thing. Vander Esch now, I don't remember if the other 3 guys, there was something out beforehand for them, but there was definitely stuff out on Vander Esch ahead of time, and the Cowboys took him anyway.
Yeah, and health and situation matters the most. Situation, we talked about Rosen, we talked about Minkah Fitzpatrick. It matters tremendously. And I always said injuries are a freak occurrence, but unless there's a pattern of injury following you from college, that's what you have to trust. And like you said, you got information that came out in Dallas with that, and and it proved to be true. And you're right, we were in Dallas because that's where I ran into you at the food station. It's funny how that was a pretty good spread down there in Dallas.
All right, so the next up, we got the Titans took Rashaan Evans, the linebacker, at 22. The Patriots took Isaiah Wynn at 23, and the Carolina Panthers got DJ Moore at 24.
Evans has been solid for Tennessee. When we talk about injuries, he has to find a way to stay healthy. He's been hurt or missed time every year in the league. But when he's out there, he's playing well. So you got to hope that guys can stay healthy. And that's going to be the biggest key. And DJ Moore has been as good as advertised. He's gotten better every year. He's a physical player at the point of attack. And was one of those guys that everyone liked as a prospect, amongst the draft community. And he's proven to be a very solid pro.
Then we get to 25. The Ravens take Hayden Hurst, the tight end who's now in Atlanta. And speaking of Atlanta, they took wide receiver Calvin Ridley. And the Seahawks took Rashad Penny, the running back from San Diego State.
Penny was my number 2 back in that year, that draft class. I had him 10 points below Saquon Barkley, who I had as a 91 grade. So I had about a late first on Penny because of his explosiveness and speed. But we never got to see that because he stayed hurt, nagging injuries, wasn't in shape, and it's tough because this was someone that you watched him at San Diego State. He ran for over 2,400 yards, some ridiculous number that season, and had many long runs, but just couldn't get out of his own way as a pro. And now may just end up bouncing around. He's still with Seattle, but you may end up seeing him bounce around the league as a complimentary guy. And that's not, that's a probably my biggest whiff in the first round. Hayden Hurst, the big thing about him was the age. He was 25 years old, but he had the good speed, the good ability to get out and get down the field. But people were worried about his upside because he was 25, I believe. But he's been a solid player. It was good for the Ravens that rookie year, and solid enough to where he warranted trade value to go to Atlanta and play there. Now he's gonna have to work behind Kyle Pitts and Ridley. I'm surprised Ridley fell this far. So that's a big time pickup for Atlanta. He's going to be their number 1 this year, co-number 1 with Kyle Pitts, but Ridley has been phenomenal with the Falcons and probably should have gone way higher, at least ahead of DJ Moore, in my opinion.
Next 4 picks, the Steelers took safety Terrell Edmunds. The Jaguars took D-tackle Taven Bryan from Florida. The Vikings took cornerback Mike Hughes from UCF. Those are 3 pretty rough picks, actually. The bottom of round 1 was not nearly as good as the rest of it.
Yeah, Edmunds was a shock. Bryan had, some interest. I like Bryan as a prospect. He was quick off the ball and flash, but he'd do it consistently, and that kind of can get you into trouble. That's something that I learned. Watch how these guys play over the course of different games, because when they flash, it kind of can be fool's gold. But he has to find a way to stay consistent in the NFL. Sony Michel is my number 3 back in this draft class, and injuries, just consistently not being able to be out there kind of hurt him. Mike Hughes was my number 1 overall corner in the class. I really liked his game. He gets out there, plays well, plays into the starting lineup, and then gets hurt, tears his ACL. I think his first or second game of that rookie season, and has been dealing with nagging injuries since then. So for me, to your point, injuries is critical to a lot of these guys' success. If you could be out there, you can get a better chance to realize your potential.
Perhaps the most interesting pick of the whole draft, the last pick of round 1, the Baltimore Ravens traded with the Eagles to get Lamar Jackson, Emory.
Funny how this works out, man. And I sent you the tweet this morning, talking about, my thoughts was after I spoke with Lamar at the combine. I went out in the lobby and tweeted out what I tweeted out, that no matter who gets this dude, that team will be in the playoffs this season. And lo and behold, he leads them to the playoffs that year and wins the division. And this is the part that people don't give Lamar Jackson a lot of credit for. Imagine being thrown into the game as a rookie quarterback in week 9 and having to play essentially 7 playoff games to get to the playoffs. This dude went out there and won 6 of those 7 games. They had Kansas City beat. It took a miraculous Mahomes toss on 4th down to beat the Ravens, and that pushed that game into overtime. So Lamar went out there without the offense catered around him. Week 9, they were 4-5, had to rip off a lot of those wins to get into the playoffs. To me, that's more impressive than his MVP season. How many rookies can you say were able to thrive in those adverse situations like this dude did, thrown into the mix, needing to win every doggone game, and they did it.
It's really interesting if you look at round 2. I mean, near the top, you've got home runs like Nick Chubb. And how about the Colts back-to-back in round 2, getting Darius Leonard and Braden Smith? It's big time. But then you see other guys that haven't really panned out quite as much so far. Kerryon Johnson, Dante Pettis. I mean, there is a wide range of outcomes for these second-round guys. That's for sure. We mainly did round 1. We weren't going to go through all the picks for the other rounds anyway. Starting next week, we are diving in. We will pick a conference. Emory, I'm going to let you pick. We'll surprise the folks what conference we start with next week. The college football season will be here before you know it. We'll make sure you know about the best prospects, the best players on each team. Other than that, the keg is kicked. We're all tapped out.
Thanks for listening to the College Draft Podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Fantasy Feast, Even Money, and The Business of Sports. All available at Apple Podcasts, rosstucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.
A lot of times on the show, I mentioned DraftKings. Here's what you need to know. You got to be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. By the way, if what I was talking about included a deposit bonus, doesn't always, sometimes it does. Deposit bonus requires 25 times playthrough, and deposit bonuses are paid out in site credit.